So, I just finished Dark Souls for the first time, a game that I never really thought I would play, let alone beat in its entirety, and so I have a lot to talk about. It's a game that really struck a chord with me and made me feel a whole lot of things, a whole range of emotions, and it kind of blew me away. Now, I didn't want to sit down and have to write a new script and stop the work that I've been doing on the Black Flag video, which is coming in the next few weeks, hopefully, fingers crossed. And so I thought it made a bit more sense to format this video in that of a trying to process video, which I've done for, games in the past. God of War, Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man, Final Fantasy 16, and apply it to Dark Souls. Because that format doesn't just have to be for brand new games, it can be for any game that I play that strikes a chord with me, and Dark Souls definitely did. And if you're a regular watcher of the channel and you want to know what I'm doing with the Black Flag video and other projects and just sort of what's going on, because I have been away for a while, stay tuned to the end of the video for a few updates on that when we go into the outro. Now, I've known of Dark Souls for a long time, obviously. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what Dark Souls is, and even if you've not played it, you've probably played a Souls-like or something that was inspired by Dark Souls. I know I played, plenty. Jedi, Survivor, and Fallen Order, Code Vein, Tunic, but I'd never played Dark Souls before. To me, it was just a game that just wasn't for me. It was made for other people, and I was never really going to like it, and I kind of sucked at it, and it was just, I'm never going to give it a go. And that's just sort of how I left it for a really, really long time. Until I eventually played one of these games in January of 2021, that being the Demon's Souls remake. And I had good fun with it. I had a really nice time. It was satisfying beating a lot of the bosses and getting through the game, and when I beat the game, I felt this sense of overwhelming relief that it was over. And I thought that's how you were supposed to feel beating one of these games. I thought you were supposed to feel like, oh god, thank god it's over. Maybe I'll do another one at some point, but god, I'm so glad to be out of there and doing something else. I just thought that was sort of how you were supposed to feel. But I think it's very clear, if you go back and watch those streams, because I streamed my whole playthrough of it, that I didn't know what I was doing. For a large chunk of that game, there maybe was some points where I was a bit more in control, but I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was struggling in almost every area, not necessarily on every boss, because I was doing the bosses pretty quick and they are pretty easy in Demon's Souls. But even towards the end of the game, I was mad, I was angry, I was getting frustrated because I didn't understand the game. Even by the end, I hadn't got it yet, it hadn't clicked, and so I felt frustrated and glad to be done with it, which actually isn't how you're supposed to feel completing one of these games. The second one I played was Elden Ring, and I felt pretty similarly. I found Elden Ring to be a lot easier, I kind of got on with it a bit more, but I eventually just trailed off. I just sort of found myself not really interested in the whole experience, and I think that partly was because I still didn't really get it. I still didn't get it. Something hadn't clicked yet, and it just didn't gel with me. I felt like I wasn't enjoying it, I wasn't having fun, none of it felt satisfying, and it felt like I was just going around in circles and I was getting bored, which is strange to think about looking back now. But what really made it click for me, what made everything make sense, and what made me and pushed me to play Dark Souls was finishing Bloodborne. I started Bloodborne in December of 2022, which is a while ago, and I only finished it about 3 weeks ago. I streamed my entire playthrough of Bloodborne, so you can check that out if you want to, just like I did with all my time with Elden Ring as well. But Bloodborne, that's where I got it. Everything just clicked into place. And I've said this in previous videos, I think I mentioned it in my end of 2023 look back at games that I played video. It was partly also watching H Bomber Guy's video on Bloodborne that made it click for me too. Because it had clicked while I was playing, but I don't think I'd understood quite why it had clicked for me until I watched that video, where he discusses how the omission of the shield in favor of a gun actually engages players in a way they're supposed to engage with these games. Rather than turtling up behind your shield and losing all of your stamina and getting frustrated, the gun forces you to play aggressively, to be quick, to think on your feet, and not to play defensively. And when you start to play like that, it opens up a whole new world in these games. And I think for me, that really did click in Bloodborne. And I enjoyed going around the levels, I felt better equipped, I never felt outmatched or overwhelmed or like I couldn't beat the next thing that was up ahead. I was not getting frustrated, I was just, let's reset and let's go again. And that feeling it changes the whole game. And I look back at Demon's Souls and I look back at Elden Ring and I think I would love those now. I would enjoy those in such a different way now I get the games and I understand how you can turn these insurmountable odds into something that can actually be kind of trivial once you understand the game. And it made me want to finally play Dark Souls. I know this was a bit of preamble leading up to this, but I think my history with these games is important for understanding why this game worked, how it worked, and why it's taken me so long to play it. I think context is always important for anything like this. My general playthrough of Dark Souls was pretty bare bones, and I plan to eventually go back and do other things and re-experience aspects of the game because I'd like to go in with a more purposeful approach in the future, but with this one I wanted to go in pretty much completely blind other than the bits that I did know about the game because, I mean, everyone kind of knows a lot about Dark Souls, or maybe that's just me, I sort of inadvertently picked up a bunch of information, so I would get to an area and be like, oh, I know there's a thing here, or oh, I know there's a secret wall, or oh, I know what the boss is, or I know how to deal with this. So there were those aspects because I just kind of know bits and pieces about Dark Souls. But I wanted to go in as blind as possible. No guides, none of that, unless I really needed it. If there was something that, like an item I picked up, and I was like, oh, I wonder what this is, I would Google it and be like, oh, okay, that's what that thing does. So I was aware, but I wasn't actively, following a guide. And so what that means is I didn't really complete any of the NPC side quests, because for me, I wanted to make sure that this playthrough was just, I'm going to beat the final boss, and once that's done, I've beat the game. I'll go back at some point and I will do all the other things and I will do all the NPC quests and I'll really indulge in all of that stuff. But I felt that while I was approaching this game for the very first time, trying to understand new areas, an entirely new map layout, deal with a brand new boss I hadn't fought, totally new enemies, I could not be dicking around looking for NPCs in every nook and cranny of a new area, because I felt that it would detract from the experience of actually learning the game if I was trying to 100% it on my first playthrough. So I decided if I found an NPC, I would talk to them, see what they said, maybe I'd try and continue their quest line, but I wasn't going to be Googling, oh, how do I make sure I do this or do that, because I felt that it would detract from really just authentically experiencing the game. And when I go back, I'll do it then. And so what this playthrough was for me was finally getting it in the best way possible. I, at no point during the playthrough of Dark Souls that I did, felt overwhelmed, other than in a good way. I never felt that I was being unfairly treated, other than a couple little instances where the game bugged out or there was a bit of jank or something. Ultimately, I didn't really struggle at all. And I think part of what makes Dark Souls so compelling and engaging, and it takes away a lot of the feeling of stress, is taking it slow. Just sort of slowly meandering through a level and being like, I wonder what's around this corner, and let's deal with every enemy as it comes to me, and eventually I'll reach that next bonfire. Instead of trying to brute force and charge all the way through to the next one, it's a methodical and sort of slow exercise, which is interesting because Bloodborne favors aggression a lot more than Dark Souls, but for some reason I learned that lesson from Bloodborne. Whereas if you look at me play Demon's Souls and especially Elden Ring, I am trying to blitz it as quickly as I can for some reason. And that's not really how they're supposed to be played. I remember when I first got to Firelink Shrine, and I recognized the area because it's iconic, and I rested at the bonfire, and then I had to set out. I had to decide where I wanted to go, and I think I tried a few different routes. I think I went into the graveyard for a bit and realized, oh, that's a bit too tricky, and eventually, pretty easily figured it out and got to Undeadburg, because the game sort of does funnel you in that direction pretty easily by having some enemies there, and it's like, okay, these guys are pretty easy, okay, I'll go this way. After that point, everything opened up to me. Everything just felt so organic and made sense. And as I was making my way through this world and linking myself back around and opening up these shortcuts, it was just such, a transcendent experience. Everything about Dark Souls is beautiful. And I mean that in the literal sense. Not that it's beautifully horrific, that it is a beautiful game. And the way it's executed just speaks to me so strongly. I guess to generally discuss my experience with world design in this, because it's a huge component of it, it's one of the most interestingly designed worlds I have ever experienced. And I've played other Souls-likes, and I understand that the maps are supposed to, loop back around, and you find these shortcuts and what else, and that's sort of part of the experience. They do it in Star Wars Jedi, those games, and they do it in, I've obviously played Bloodborne, and you do it in that, but this game is so different in that it's not it's not levels with interconnected paths, it is a world with interconnected paths. The way that you can get shortcuts from Blighttown back to Firelink to get to New Londo, to get to the Valley of the Drakes, like the way that this world is connected, and the way the big door that opens to the Valley of the Drakes from New Londo is that moment for me was like, of course that's where that goes. Of course it is. But I hadn't even thought about it. It's that you see that big door when you're in the Valley of the Drakes and you're thinking, I wonder where that door leads. And then you see the big door on the other side and you open it and it opens up and you're like, oh, yeah, of course that was where it opened up to. But I didn't even think about it. And it's just so wonderful every time that happens. I don't think there was a single time in Dark Souls 1 where this happened that I didn't audibly go, oh yeah, of course. Because every single time I was in awe of how the map wrapped around itself in a way that I didn't expect it to, but made perfect sense. And there's a sense of satisfaction there that is just so difficult to describe if you haven't played it before, because by the end you have this intimate knowledge of this world and this layout, and I am never ever going to forget Dark Souls. I don't think I'm ever not going to remember how to get from one place to another, because you just remember it so well. Because each section is broken up into these very small areas between bonfires and bosses, it ends up not becoming super overwhelming. When you enter a brand new area, yes, you feel overwhelmed and you think, oh my goodness, this is going to be a task. I'm going to have to get all the way through. I need to find a bonfire. I've got to get to the boss. But once you do it, once you reach that next bonfire, once you reach that next boss, you look back at it and you think, that wasn't that big. That was a pretty small area. It was well designed, it was intricately laid out, it had all of these interconnecting paths, but ultimately, it was a relatively small space, and so it sticks in your mind. You don't have a million pathways to remember, you have 4 or 5, but they're so well laid out that they stick in your mind, and you will always remember it, and you remember how that area links to the next, and how that links to the next, and how that links all the way back around to the first, and that design just makes it so compelling because you're not in an area for hours and hours. Levels in Dark Souls are not hours long. They are 20 minutes and you're in the next area. And that is what makes it so engaging, because you don't feel, you're always getting these small little reminders that you did it, you made it, let's push on, let's do the next bit. Whereas if, say, Tomb of the Giants, for example, was an hour long, I think a lot of people go, okay, I'm going to put this down for now and I'm going to do something else. But because it's so short, because if you want to get from the first bonfire out of the Tomb of the Giants, it's probably, you know, if you don't fight any enemies, it's probably like a 3-minute walk. But if you do fight enemies, it's probably closer to maybe 10 minutes. And the fact that it's designed like that pushes players on. It makes you want to do the next one because you're like, oh god, I did that quicker than I expected. You know what, let's do the next area. And it's that sort of short burst of satisfaction that makes the oppressive vibe and tone so worth it. And it makes you feel like you are conquering these insane feats. There is, of course, though, the criticism, and I agree too, that the second half of the game is a lot less refined than the first half. I still think it's great, and I still think it's fun, and I still think it has a lot of merit, but it is not as good as the first half. The entire first half of the game, all the way up to Ornstein and Smough, is just intricately, beautifully crafted, and it's some of the best shit I've ever played. The second half is still great, and I would still consider it to be, you know, really, really strong, but it loses the sense of interconnectedness after you get the Lord Vessel because you're teleporting around. Some of the bosses can be a little bit gimmicky, as well as, you know, the levels with Lost Izalith or Izalith being lava. You've got the crystal caves being invisible platforms. You've got the ghosts in New Londo. You've got the darkness in Tomb of the Giants. And so you do end up with this sense of, it's kind of, it feels almost worse because it's so much lesser than what came before. If the whole game had just been what the second half is, it'd still be a really great game. But because you had this masterpiece of level design before Ornstein and Smough, it makes what comes after considerably worse, because it feels clumsy in contrast to what came before. In terms of areas that I really liked or really didn't vibe with that much, I think some of my favourite areas were things like the Undead Burg I love, and the Undead Parish I thought was really good. I didn't really struggle too much with Blighttown, to be honest with you. I thought it was pretty pretty much, kind of piss easy, to be honest, after everything I'd heard about it being, like, super fucking difficult. I struggled a lot more with the catacombs and the depths, and Tomb of the Giants was a bit of a bitch, too. Anor Londo, I was a little bit split on. I like it, like, aesthetically and stuff, and there's some really nice parts to it, but also there's elements, it feels a bit weird in places. I'm not sure how to describe it. It feels like a little bit bare bones and odd. It feels like it's an area that almost wasn't finished. I don't know, it's difficult to describe that one, but I still have fun with it. I really enjoyed Sen's Fortress, even though it was hard and tough and I did struggle in areas. I really like it as an area. I really enjoyed getting to the end of that. It felt really cool. I really enjoy it. And the interconnectedness and shortcuts and stuff, I really enjoyed that one. The Painted World was great too. I really enjoyed the Painted World. I thought that was really, really cool. Well designed. I love the looping back around in that middle area to open the big door and have a nice run through straight to the boss. I thought that was really cool. And the DLC areas were fantastic. I really, really enjoyed the DLC section. That was some of the best stuff in the game. Artorias, for example, that boss fight, that might be my favorite boss in the game, to be honest with you. I reckon that was the most fun I had with a boss in the game. The speed, the fluidity, the dodges, I loved it. I thought that was tremendous. And the whole area and stuff was really, really cool. The DLC is very strong. In terms of combat itself and the way that it all functions, I've said this before and I said it on stream and I've sort of mentioned it in passing, but I prefer Dark Souls as a game to Bloodborne in every way except for the combat itself. I feel like Bloodborne feels far more refined. There's a speed and a pace to it, and I feel like the bosses are a lot more complicated. Obviously, that's unfair to say because I feel like probably what they've done is every time they've made a game, they've made it more complex. And so going back to Dark Souls 1, obviously it's going to be less complex, and that's fine. It's not really a criticism that I have. It's just sort of an opinion I feel. I breezed through a lot of Dark Souls. It wasn't until I got to Ornstein and Smough that I had any sort of challenge, and a lot of that's kind of from the bullshit. I've compared Ornstein and Smough to the Shadows of Yharnam in that Shadows of Yharnam is 3 enemies and they're all bosses, and that's a lot easier and better designed than Ornstein and Smough, which is 2 bosses, and they're just kind of like flailing at you, and their attack patterns do not complement each other. They're just 2 enemies they've plopped down next to each other, and the difficulty really comes from that, because if you were fighting one or the other, they'd be easy. But because you're fighting both, it makes it hard, and that's kind of bullshit. Even after Ornstein and Smough, I really didn't have a lot of challenge. I found myself doing pretty fine on all of the bosses and all of the areas. I died a few times, don't get me wrong, but I still found myself doing pretty well. And maybe that's because I had a new mindset with it, and I didn't feel that every time I died it was a huge setback. I felt like it was just part of the experience, and so maybe I don't remember getting frustrated, so I don't remember having trouble with some of the bosses, but I don't remember having trouble with any of the bosses. And I think that's because I was experienced and I knew what I was doing. Like, having had played Demon Souls and Elden Ring and Bloodborne, I feel like going into this I sort of knew what I was doing. I sort of understood the whole thing, and I was able to adapt to it pretty quickly. Whereas you see a lot of new players will really, really struggle. Like, half of the challenge of your first Souls game is figuring out how you're supposed to play the game, which you could argue is a negative, but I don't know, I think it's part of the experience. The way that these fights are designed, though, just on an enemy basis or a boss basis, is so wonderful, and it always has been. The way that you weave and you dodge and, you parry and all of this, it just feels so damn satisfying when you land a parry on a knight, or when you backstab someone from behind, or when you weave through a boss's legs to deal some damage. It feels tremendous, and I really, really like that. It feels great, and it feels wonderful, especially when you've just upgraded a weapon or just put some levels in, you come back stronger and you're able to take him out with a couple of hits. It feels really, really good, and I think that is one of the most fun elements of Dark Souls, being able to master a section or an enemy or a boss and come out the other end feeling good about yourself for having learned something, and I really like that. Part of what maybe trivialized it for me, though, was the way that I designed my character, because I feel like somehow I made myself incredibly overpowered. Now, the thing is, I never farmed for souls. I just sort of played the game. And yeah, I never skip enemies. If I see an enemy, I will usually kill it. I don't often run past them. And maybe that's part of it. That's how I always played Kingdom Hearts. I would never skip enemies because every piece of XP is valuable, because when you come across the next strong boss, you're going to want those levels. You don't want to be under-leveled. And I think in doing that, in that being my philosophy, and with a lot of the backtracking in the game, and if you die to a boss, you end up going through an area fighting the same enemies again, I accidentally got myself to an insane level by mistake. but it was really fun. I like that about Dark Souls, the fact that just by playing the game well and understanding how to spec into things, you can create a build that just feels good for you. And I wasn't playing with any like particular build in mind. I mean, I like fast swords, so I usually spec into dex, but other than that, I was just kind of going as I went, and I was like, right, well, I'd like to have a lot of armor so that I can kind of like tank a few hits here and there, because I think that would be nice. So I decided to put points into endurance to increase my equip load. I got Havel's ring, so that increased my equip load again, and I was able to put on, you know, heavier armor. I was wearing some of the stone set by the end, and upgrading this, you know, this katana thing that I found. I think it's in Blighttown, and using that and upgrading it with dexterity, and then getting, you know, putting the rest of my points into my health, and I just sort of had this weird combination build of like, I was quick enough to get my dodges in and stuff, and that was really cool, but at the same time I had a lot of armor and a lot of health, so even if I did miss dodges, it didn't matter that much. So it was like I was able to master a boss, and I was able to like duck and weave, but at the same time I didn't have to. If I missed something, it wasn't a huge punishment. I like had that back to fall back on, and it wasn't because I like selected an easy mode in a menu. It's because I worked for it, and I spec'd my character the way that I wanted to for my playstyle, or the way that I wanted to experience the game. And I like that you're able to do that. It just makes it feel satisfying to get to that point where before, yeah, maybe you were struggling and it was a bit tough, and you had to take your armor off to be able to roll quickly, but by the end, it's like I've spec'd my character in such a way that it just works for the way that I play. It's so organic and natural, and I just think that is one of the most fun parts about these games, is slowly building up your character the way that you want. And I really enjoyed that here. A lot of people have criticized Dark Souls for having too many weapons. I think I've seen that in some of the critiques or reviews in the past, and that, you know, Bloodborne improved on it because it has far less weapons that are all more specific. And while I agree from a game design perspective, I also think I love the amount of crazy variety there is in Dark Souls. The fact that there is so much different stuff that you really can create vastly different builds. Even though some might be similar, you can choose what you want to do, and I think that's really cool, and I really enjoyed that in this game, and I'm looking forward to playing the other Dark Souls games and seeing how they adjust or adapt or change that, and eventually preparing myself to jump into Elden Ring and do it all again. Finally, I think it's worth talking about the story and the themes and the tone of the game. Like I said, I didn't indulge too much in the NPC side quests because it's something that I want to come back to do later with actual purpose to get them all done and explore them and see what they do. So I haven't experienced all that the game has to offer in terms of that, but from what I have, there is this incredible tonal balance they create in Dark Souls, and I didn't feel that it was particularly there in Demon Souls. Demon Souls to me felt very hopeless and oppressive for the entirety, and that could have been the mindset that I went into it with, and so that's the tone that came across, and I could be completely wrong, and it does the same thing that Dark Souls does. But I felt with Dark Souls differently that this world, while oppressive, and yes, while depressing and dark and bleak, there is a through line of hope that is there for the entire game. Every time you light a bonfire, every time you meet an NPC, you feel this sense of relief. You speak to them and there's this genuine, like real, authentic human exchange between you and this person that you've met. And whether it's someone that eventually is going to betray you in the end, that you can probably tell, like I knew this fucking guy in the gold armor would, I killed him because he seemed dodgy. I was right, by the way. And I got a sick ring out of it too, so that was cool. But most of the time when you speak to these people, it feels so comforting, and I never felt that before with these games. Every time I saw the NPC dialogue, I thought, oh my god, this is so depressing. These guys are so depressed. These guys are struggling. Like, this is just awful. Everything sucks. But playing it for myself and really understanding it, that's not the case at all. When you speak to these NPCs, there really is this sense of hope. When they all show up to Firelink and you've got all of these different guys here that, you know, can act as vendors, it just feels so much. And that's a weird thing to say, and probably not a great point of critique because it's so vague, but it did just make me feel so much. The way they use music sparingly, the way that the art design is done, the art style of this game and the way that it's designed is just so gorgeous in the most wonderful of ways. The way that the sun shines through Anor Londo, or the ending of the game where you get to the area before the final boss, or even just the opening cinematic. The game is just brimming with style, and that's something that just encompasses your experience and sets the mood so well. In terms of the ending, I went with the dark ending. You can do two if you're not aware. Either you light the flame at the end and continue the Age of Fire, or you leave and you enter the Age of Dark, which might sound bad, and both kind of do sound bad, but in terms of Dark Souls, it's not really that. In a lot of media, light is good, dark is bad, but that's not really what it means in Dark Souls. The Age of Fire is more an age of, well, I mean, I guess I'm not really 100% sure, but to me it felt like that's sort of like an age of magic, I guess, whereas the Age of Dark is the age of men. It made more sense to me. There's like these two snake things, serpent things throughout the game that give you these different options and sort of explain it to you. And the second one that talks about the dark, to me, made far more sense. And I was like, yeah, that's the one I'm definitely going to go with. I think I don't want to perpetuate the Age of Fire that we are currently in that has been, bad. And so that's the one that I went with. Defeating Gwyn at the end was, what a fight. Like, what a genuinely, this game is so artful in the way that it does what it does. It's so careful and precise. And when you enter that boss arena after this walk through this area of the world that is just so bleak and devastated and crumbling, you enter this room with this old guy trying desperately to cling on to this flame that is slowly going out, and you just decimate him and he dies. And there's no fanfare and there's no cutscene. There's none of that. He's just dead, and he's gone, and you've won, and that's it. You beat Dark Souls. That's how it ends. And that feeling is just so much better than any epic cutscene could have been, because it's so understated, it's so subtle, but it's so in line with the themes and ideas of the game that, oh god, it's moving, and it's beautiful, and the game is just so good. And if you want to see my time with the ending, I actually streamed the ending of the game. I was planning to just hop on stream and just mop up a few little things here and there, just on stream to just hang out and have fun, because I played the whole thing sort of in my own free time. But because I was having so much fun, I ended up getting to the end and finishing the game on stream. So if you want to see my reaction to the end and my initial thoughts, I'll link that stream VOD in the description if you're interested. And in terms of Dark Souls, my plan for Dark Souls moving forward is I want to replay the first one at some point. Maybe after my experience of the rest of them, I'll come back and give it another look after understanding where they take the series next. But then I want to move on and play Dark Souls 2 at some point, and I want to play Dark Souls 3, and I want to try Elden Ring again. And I'm not going to do them all one after the other, because I will burn myself out, and I've done that before with like Final Fantasy, playing them all one after the other. As much as I love them, it burned me out. And so I don't want to do that with Dark Souls. I want to give myself a bit of a break, even though I'm dying to jump into another one. I'm going to give myself a break, and then I'm going to play Dark Souls 2 refreshed, and I'm going to tackle what that game has to offer and take it for what it is. I know a lot of people don't like it that much, but I want to take it for what it is and experience that and see if I can find something to like in it. And then obviously I'll move on and at some point do 3 and Elden Ring, and I'll do one of these videos on those two, because it would be nice to sort of document my thoughts and my journey here on the channel. And if you're interested, then you can listen. And those are my concise and off-the-cuff thoughts on my experience with Dark Souls. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was terrific. And I think it's, while flawed, an absolute masterpiece. And it's a masterpiece that everybody should play, because I really think you're missing out. And I think the idea that Dark Souls isn't for everyone is a lie. I think Dark Souls can absolutely be for anybody, because of the way that it's built to allow accessibility, and because of the way that the themes are woven into the game itself. I think it can speak to pretty much anyone if you're willing to be open to it. And that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed listening to what I had to say about Dark Souls. I did intend for the first video this year to be my Black Flag retrospective. I wanted to come back with a heavy hitter like that, but I finished Dark Souls and I really did want to talk about it, so I decided, fuck it, that can be, the next video or whatever. I'll talk about Dark Souls first and we can have this out. So I apologize if this is a little underwhelming, if you wanted like a big scripted project from me. Yeah, no, I did too, but it's just taken me a really long time. My aim was to get the Black Flag video out by the end of February, and I could still do that, but I haven't finished the script yet. I'm still scripting, which is one of the longest parts of the process, I think. Once I'm done that, the editing should be quick enough. So if I can finish the script within the next week, then that should give me a couple weeks to edit it, and I should be able to get it done. But it's turning out to be very long, I don't tweet much anymore, but I do kind of just dump random thoughts on the incredible social media platform that is Threads. So if you want to follow me there, or on Blue Sky, I'm on both, so you can follow me. My links are in the description to those. I mainly use Twitter for important things, or stuff I really want to say to a large audience. These other ones are kind of just, I use Blue Sky for sometimes, and I use Threads just to randomly dump out thoughts on things and give updates on projects. So if you want to follow me there and know what's going on, then you can. I am about 52 pages into the Black Flag script as of recording this video, which is, to put that in perspective, my AC1 video was 79 pages. So that's concerning. I'm not sure how long it's going to end up being. I've only just finished writing sequence 6, so I have like half the game left to go still. So the video could be well over 100 pages, which, Jesus Christ. The thing with this is, and I wish I could cut it down, I've been reading back through it, and there's nothing I want to cut. Everything I say I feel is meaningful, has substance, is something I actually wanted to say, and anything that doesn't I have cut, and it just hasn't cut it down very much. So I think, look, at the end of the day, it's just going to be a massive fucking video, and that's fine. I guess that's what I do now, is those massive fucking videos. So, you know, that's just how it is, and we'll have to see if it works out well. I don't know. The only other thing slowing me down for production of this video is that I want to make a video exclusive to Patreon. That's my new thing. I've been talking about this before. Every time I release a big video, I want there to be a companion video exclusive to patrons, because I want to, you know, get back to patrons and create more stuff over there, because I want it to be a place that people feel like it's worth being at, because it will, you know, help actually fund me creating stuff. I'm planning to do a Freedom Cry video exclusive to Patreon, so I'm gonna have to play Freedom Cry, write the video and stuff, but it should be a bit quicker, because I don't think it's gonna be that long, because it is just obviously a DLC. But I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, once this project's done, I'm gonna be a little bit more free. I'm gonna be streaming Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Persona 3 Reload, and then also I have a little script I've been working on that I kind of want to make a thing for. I'm gonna put it on Patreon and see what people think, and then probably put it out on YouTube at the same as well. But I'm a little bit apprehensive, because it's kind of personal. It's kind of a bit of a personal script. It's a bit different, but I don't know. We'll see. And then my next sort of major project, I think, will be Final Fantasy IX. But I don't know. We'll see where things take me, and what I want to do and what I want to make. But those are my plans for over the next little while. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see where things take me. Hopefully I'll have a new Jazz Lounge out soon. Hopefully we'll relaunch Horsey and Fox soon as well. Sort of all that stuff will come together, and everything will be good, and we'll be sorted. But yeah, for now, those are my plans. And as always, thank you so much to my Patreon producers and master assassins: Cabbage, Ethan, Arenathon, Callum Thefmus Kelly, Damien, the Not So Orange Gnome, Flash Paradox, Luke Pierce, Nathan L. Garcia, and Rolands. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for listening and watching, and let me know your thoughts on Dark Souls as well. I'd appreciate it. It'd be cool to get a discussion going. And hopefully, the next time you see me or hear from me, other than, you know, if I do Horsey and Fox or Jazz Lounge or whatever, next time there's a main channel video, hopefully, it'll be the Black Flag retrospective, and it's probably going to be the biggest thing I've ever fucking made. So, we'll see. Blimey. Alright. Thank you, everybody. Love ya. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.